And welcome to the BAC podcast, the Bible, Apostolics, Current Events. Brian Sexton, Pastor Aaron Fairburn. We're going three wide today with our dear friend and brother, Assistant Pastor at Apostolic Life Cathedral, Presbyter of the section that we're a part of, for the Stephen Kuntzman, joining us today. Brother Kuntzman, and what a great honor it is for us to have you today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I started to say what a great honor it is for you to have us today, but that would have been that would have been a slip of the tongue. But we are so glad to have Brother Kuntzman with us today, and Pastor and I share a great mutual respect for you. I don't know anybody that doesn't know you, that doesn't love you and respect you, and we're so grateful that you're joining us today on the podcast. We were talking before we started recording. We'll start here because it is the Bible, Apostolics, and Current Events, the BAC podcast. So let's start here. We were talking before about the news came out yesterday or the day before, I believe, as we're recording this podcast, that the Catholic Church has a new pope, and it's the first American pope in history. You know, we as Apostolics, and we'll start here, we as Apostolics think, okay, well, what's that have to do with us? It's the Catholic Church. They're setting it up, and they're doing what they want to do. They believe that the Pope has certain giftings, and powers, and things like that. And so they put a lot of stock in the papacy. We not so much, because that's not how we believe. But give me your thoughts on what you've seen the last couple of days, the last several days, as they've been going through that. I know you study and have a keen interest in that.
Well, I think that one thing we have to remember is that while we're apostolic and we are a part of, we theologically consider ourselves not to be tied in with the Catholic Church in that timeline. We will trace our origin, what we call the womb and the matrix of the church, all the way back to the book of Acts, chapter 2, in the upper room in Jerusalem. But we're also very keenly aware of history and how that in 200, 300 years there, in that time frame, there began to be a change. And out of that eventually comes the Roman Catholic Church. And they are currently the largest Christian group in the world. So I think at one point, at least in something I read several years ago, there were like 600 million of them worldwide, I think. And so Protestants and Christian apostolics and such make up another part of that, which is almost the same amount altogether. So when they're voting in that conclave for a new pope, they believe him to be God's vicar on earth. As Jesus is in heaven, he is on the earth. And that's what they believe. And I have a friend of mine, he and his wife are in Italy right now. And they were there yesterday when the choice was made, and there was jubilation and celebration in the streets. It's a big deal for the Catholic Church. And it's a big deal for us in our time frame that we're living in. We are living in a day of upheaval, and this last Pope, Francis, he made a lot of statements that some people took issue with, seemed to downplay or come down on some of the stronger stances the Catholic Church had made in the past, and now they seem to be backing away from some of those things he did. This man, Leo, was the 14th, I think.
Yeah.
Leo is a man that was appointed as a bishop under Francis. He was then a archbishop, and now he was a cardinal, and now he's the pope. Because of the conclave. And the men in that conclave, 80% of them were all men that were appointed by Francis, which is pretty interesting. Whoever was going to be pope was going to be somebody that Francis had put in that position.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting.
Probably by design. The thing about this pope that I had read, just trying to check out, is this guy going to be conservative or not? A big indicator is by who put him in the position he put him in. And this guy rose quickly. He wasn't in a high position for long. And so being American, the very first thing I thought is, oh, what's his moral position going to be? And, so I assumed based on something I read that maybe we would avoid that. Now, I don't know. It's still to be seen. But I had seen, the Catholic Church has a strong stance. They've been under a lot of pressure to allow women into the ministry. And he has a strong stance on that. And I thought, well, maybe, but I don't know. And I want to answer a question that you kind of, or a statement you said, or why is it important? Even atheists are concerned because the Pope will set a tone for the entire Christian world of what will be done. So let's say this Pope comes in, allows homosexuality in the churches. You will see very quickly other Protestant churches eventually following suit, because the Pope will set a sort of a cultural standard that other churches, for good or bad, we would think bad, will end up following. So I think that's one of the reasons it's very important. And then also what you alluded to, which is prophecy. It's hard. I mean, I grew up on it. I think you did. I'm almost certain that you probably grew up on the same thing. When I was young, I was taught that the Pope was going to be not the Antichrist, but the false prophet. And so that's, I'm not saying he is, and I'm not saying he's not, but I say a lot of people have grown up believing that, and we've all looked toward that. So,
well, and here's the thing I heard this morning on the way over here as I was coming over here, we were recording. I heard, well, full disclosure, I was listening to Glenn Beck this morning, and he was talking about in the 1980s, Pope John Paul II, Margaret Thatcher, and Ronald Reagan being the three most driving influences for the end of communism. The fall of communism in Berlin with East Germany and West Germany. Those of us that are old enough to remember when Germany was two separate countries and they had the Berlin Wall. And Pope John Paul II was instrumental, along with President Reagan and Prime Minister Thatcher, of bringing that down. The Soviet Union, the communist stronghold that the Soviets had for all those years, and we remember we were teenagers at the time. We remember the famous phrase, Ronald Reagan stands up and he says, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall." And so you're right, Pastor, the Pope has a lot of cultural significance. Brother Kuntzman, I like what you said about the eyes of the world, no matter the denominational faith being there. I want to go to you real quick as far as that's concerned too, because you had to build consensus among men that probably had, as you mentioned, Pastor, all those conclave were handpicked by the Pope. Pope Francis had a lot of those men there. Mm. I'm sure men had their aspirations on that office because, again, you become the Pope, it's life-changing, right? Everything about your world changes. I thought about this, and I'm not trying to, go on a diatribe here. I thought about this yesterday. The Pope's name is actually Robert Prevost. He's from Chicago, Illinois. Has two brothers. I was reading this on Wikipedia. Can you imagine if your brother becomes the Pope? Do you still call him Bob? Because I mean, if I had a brother or childhood friend I grew up with, to me he would just be Bob. He wouldn't be the Pope. He'd be, hey, that's Bob.
I'm not going to call him your eminence. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I had to sleep. We ate dinner at the same table growing up. He's not your eminence to me. But you're involved as presbyter of our section in a lot of these elections and things like that. How do you keep one vision as a leader there, saying, okay, we've got to elect somebody, we've got to keep a common vision, and try to block out the noise of some folks? And but again, everybody's human. We're just going to keep it real. People have agendas. They have things that they want to accomplish, things like that. How do you keep that singular focus and everybody pointing in the same direction?
Well, I think you all know the position that has to be filled, the job requirements, the skills that need to be done, you have to have. In the case of Leo, he in Peru, and I don't remember the title of his office. So he was basically in charge of all the elections and such of the bishops and such in that area in Peru, which meant that he was well prepared and placed in a strategic position to be considered as Pope at the very beginning. It only took, was it less than 24 hours?
Yeah.
For them
They had two votes or three votes?
That, that means that people went in there already with their minds made up. When it comes to these type of things, when I go to the ballot box politically, I should have already studied their positions. I should already know about what other things are involved or they want to add to it, or if they want to work with the Board of Education or something. I should already know these things. And so many times when there's problems with elections, it's one of two things. There's no good choice, which we've seen that in our country when in election, or people don't know who to vote for.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't know the qualifications. We went to an election here a while back, and there was a little confusion about a position that was to be filled, and they had to get up and actually explain, well, this is the qualifications. This is what this post requires. And I thought at the time what they should have done was had people stand up. If you fill that position, stand up so we can have an idea. But in all honesty, that's the worst way to do it. They went into that election knowing who was qualified, or that conclave, knowing who was qualified and who wasn't. And when they prayed about it, that's, however you want to say it, they prayed about their decision. They had to. And that's key to every decision you make. Now, as apostolics, people might take issue with what I'm saying there, but they prayed. They wouldn't be there, without their men of faith in their faith.
Yeah. I'm thinking about specifically the elections that we are involved in as ministry. One of the things is there's no politicking, because we're a religious. This is the church. And so there aren't men getting up saying, hey, vote for me because I'm going to do XX. Sometimes that might be good, but at the same time, then you're going to bring a level of corruption. So, I do think that at least when I vote, I'm considering the fit. Yeah. I'm praying about it, but I'm also using my own logic to say, this guy just don't fit that position. Or, and when I say there's no politicking, I'm sure that preachers and pastors talk around a dinner table, they're friends, so they talk with each other, and but there is not a hardcore political machine, if you will, and one guy's not pushing for himself. It's a very, very gentle, very, and I think that it's a good thing ultimately for the church. Now, for the world, we want to know what they're going to do. But here's the truth. They lie. So rarely do you ever get a politician that tells you what he's going to do and does it. In the case of Donald Trump, that's been true. It's historical because nobody, and the left is so upset because he's doing what he said he would do. And this isn't a vote for or against him. I'm just saying it's so rare. Local politicians, they have all kinds of promises. They promise things they can't deliver. They know they can't deliver them when they promise them. It's impossible. Some things are just out of your hands. But anyways.
You're talking about a political Hall of Famer, Pastor, in Donald Trump, because, and I said this in 2020. I said, this is the way, if Trump wanted to be reelected, this was what he should have done. He should have said, here's the 10 things I promised in 2016. Here's the top 10 things I promised. We delivered on half of them. National, local, statewide politicians, you deliver on 50% of your promises, you're a Hall of Famer. You're a political Hall of Famer. And that's the thing.
I don't know if he's going to go down as famous or infamous. But
well, no, you're exactly right.
I think eventually maybe famous.
Well, but Brother Kuntzman, I like something that you said there. It wasn't as though it was a big secret to anybody that Pope Francis was not in good health. Mm-hmm. So these men had time to consider their decision on, okay, who's the next one going to be? Because I think, 4 or 5 weeks ago, even, the Pope passed a couple of weeks ago, but even as far back as a month and a half ago, it was touch and go for him. He was in the hospital. Things weren't going good. And you had to think that those men had to start saying, okay, I'm a part of this conclave. I understand that this could happen any day. I got to be ready to make a decision, and then start thinking about it and praying about it, because I don't know. Now, you've been in those positions. I've been in those positions. You have sudden things happen, and you've got to start, okay, we've got to make some things happen. We've got to move here. But they had a little bit of time. And I think that your point was very well made, in the sense of, it's not like these men, they live a life of faith. They have to take vows of celibacy and things like that. Mm-hmm. They give up their whole life to enter the ministry. We're fortunate. We have wives, we have children, and we're fortunate that to go into ministry as apostolics, the Lord doesn't ask you to give up everything. You give up a lot, you sacrifice a lot, but these men are really sacrificing. I mean, you've got to put the desires, let's be honest, the desires God gives you innately, you have to put them aside and focus solely on the ministry. So let me ask you this. Let's go here for a second. If you, let's say you weren't an apostolic, let's say you were a Catholic priest and things like that, what would be important to you in a situation like that? And let's talk about it from the three of our perspectives. What would be important to us?
You mean in a pope? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, first of all, I would say what an old preacher told me one time. I asked him, what would you be if you weren't apostolic? And he said, I'd be ashamed. However, I would be looking for the same things I look for now in a leader. Honesty, integrity, someone that aligns with my own theological underpinnings and my own views, whether they're conservative or liberal. And I would be looking for that. I'm looking for a man who keeps his word, that doesn't play politics, that doesn't use his words to say one thing when he means something else so that he can protect himself later on. Those are the things I would look for in a man that I would trust with my soul. And I want to circle back to something, and that is, we're talking about national politics, and then we're talking about religious politics. When you look at when that some people believe that Western Rome and Eastern Rome is Orthodox and Roman Catholic Church, but there are some who also talk about how that there is a political Rome and a religious Rome. Mm-hmm. And political Rome is still going on. You have the France thing, what do they call that? The Holy Roman Catholic Church in France, I think it was. Then you also have a religious Rome. We have to be careful because there are two different systems in play here. Religious and political are coming from two different perspectives. I am looking for a man that, when I vote for a president, I'm not looking for a man that's going to lead me in a religious manner. He's not answering for myself. I'm looking for a man that's going to keep his word. And as one man told me one time, he's going to keep his hand out of my back pocket, that kind of thing. That's what I'm looking for. When I'm looking for a man that's going to lead me, that's going to lead and be something that my congregants could respect and honor, I'm looking for what I just said: integrity, honesty, religious. I want to know that the man that I'm choosing is a prayerful man, that he makes every decision before he makes it, he's talked to God about.
Kind of the same thing you'd want in a pastor.
Exactly.
So, honestly, if I was let's say I was Catholic, here's some things we're not to understand. There's background noise that you're not thinking about. If I'm Catholic and they voted in a pope, I'm assuming, without ever thinking about it, that this is the will of God. And I would never question that. I was thinking about you saying, well, if I had a brother, if I had a brother who was pope, most likely I'm Catholic. And if I'm Catholic, I'm going to see my brother differently then, because that's just the way, it's the way you're brought up. It's the mindset. Also in that background noise, like Brother Kuntzman said, there is a religious and a political side. Back in, I think it was the 8th or 9th century. Oh, no, maybe it was the 9th or 10th century. It was something like that. There was a man by the name of Charlemagne. And Charlemagne, if I remember correctly, Charlemagne was a Germanic king. And he was knighted by the Pope at the time to be Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. So they absolutely do have this political wing. The Catholic Church is set up in such a way, it's structured in such a way, you guys may remember this. I think, we've read a lot of the same stuff. You probably have heard this, but there was a time when there was some tell-all kind of books that come out about certain wings of the Catholic Church and some of the things that they had done to protect the Catholic Church, particularly against Protestants. And one of those tell-all was, if I'm not mistaken, this last pope was part of the order of, was it Franciscans? Is that what he was? What was it? That's why they all remember all the prophecies. This is the last pope, because they said he's the black pope because he was the highest ranking member of the order he was in. And I say Franciscans, I don't know if it was or not. But anyways, that order that he actually was the even though he wasn't the head of it because he was elected part of it, became the highest. That order came from, it was the same order that actually was responsible for the Inquisition. Okay, so obviously they don't do Inquisition anymore. Obviously that's not the way it happens. But however, there's certain mindset that follows, and there's, protection of the church. And so, like I said, if I'm Catholic, I'm not questioning anything. Mm-hmm. This is God's man on earth, right? And I'm going to be joyful. I seen a kid up on his father's shoulders just throwing an American flag. I thought, how in the world did they know to bring an American flag? Apparently, some people already thought this guy could get it. And it was joyful, and I could imagine if I was Catholic, that's probably how I would have felt. And, in some sense, let me just tell you, I think we all deep down hope for a righteous pope because of the implication for the whole entire world.
Well, and here's the thing that I will say is, to piggyback off of what you said, Pastor, is that the Pope will be called upon to deal with world leaders. We saw the day that the Pope Francis's last day on earth, he entertained Vice President Vance and had him and his family there. And so again, it's important for the Pope to have those conversations with world leaders. What concerns me is there's some rumblings that he's not exactly a Donald Trump fan. That's our sitting president. Yeah. But again,
just to go into that, the reason is he shares the same values that the last pope did about poor people. And when they, it's easy to conflate these two. And I'm not saying I'm unbiased either. It's possible that maybe I see it a certain way, but they're saying, well, the way he's treating the immigrants, these poor, helpless immigrants. And so that's where they're at odds mostly, is because on the moral issues, everybody has to realize that the Catholic Church so far, even though this last pope was a little, they have stayed pretty strong about the moral issues, which is really why we're so concerned about this pope. Because if he's loose on the moral issues, right, it takes away the strength. Look, we're apostolic. This is one small group inside of a large group of people called Christians. And so whether you want to accept this or not, there's a reality that as a whole block, we become important as a whole block. You want to see that perfectly demonstrated. There was hardly any friction between Christian groups in America when COVID come out. We were all together and we were all rooting for each other because we were all fighting a common enemy. The enemy wasn't the government per se, but it was this, we would say, a spirit that had kind of come against the church, trying to shut us down. And so when you control the thoughts and the hearts of that many people, this is why that whole block is important, because as a Christian block, we want to stay united. And if they break away and go to a lesser moral standard than we have, that really adds a tremendous amount of pressure on us, which, who knows, could be good or bad, but we really don't prefer to have that pressure.
Well, and you were talking about something there, and great perspective from both of you when you were talking about COVID. It didn't matter what your church size was, because you were going through the same thing everybody else was. You could have a church of 25, and the government was shutting you down as though you had a church of 2,500.
Yeah.
And so, again, that was commonality there. And, again, we've always been taught, you and I have very heavy sales backgrounds, things like that. Brother Kuntzman, you've got a strong business acumen as well, too. What's the two things we were always told you never talk about? Politics and religion.
Yeah.
And because they're divisive issues. Yeah. And so I love what you said there about the commonality and the Catholic, and you're right, in a lot of ways, the Catholic Church, from a societal perspective, just because of sheer volume of numbers, they led those moral conversations, where Apostolics were like, yeah, we agree with them. We just don't have the numbers that they've got in sheer volume. But, Brother Kuntzman, I want to jump back to you real quick. Leadership. You mentioned that. That was one of the first things you said about leadership. When you're coming in, and you just went through this a couple years ago, coming in being a presbyter, what's the first thing you feel like as a leader that Pope Leo, if you said, okay, I want to make sure he does this thing in leadership, from personal experience, being a new guy coming in and having to lead a group of men that are already established, what are some of the things that you're looking to see how he does in that realm?
Well, I would say, first of all, he needs to, and he probably already has done this, that's why he's Pope, but you need to know the men that you're working with. In my case, I came in as a presbyter, and I needed to not just know them by face, but get to know them personally. So I've tried to talk with all of them. We have 15 churches in our section. And then I needed to work on unity among them, to make sure we're all unified. We all have differences of opinion, but that doesn't mean you can't be unified. And so we began to work on that. The Bible says that, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. It is like the oil that ran down the beard, even Aaron's beard. And so what that tells me is when we get unified together, whether it's our section, whether it's a church, whether it's an organization, or whether it's over in Rome, when you're unified, there something happens in the atmosphere. He said it's like the ointment. So if I can let's take it to the local level. If I can work and have unity in my congregation as a pastor between the people, that anointing, that unity produces an anointing that rests upon the pastor. And then when that happens, miraculous things begin to happen and growth begins to happen. Now, as far as the Pope, that's a different subject. They need unity. They probably already have a lot of it. They're not going to come out they're coming out of that conclave. If they disagree, they're coming out unified. And that's what the church needs to do. We need to be unified publicly. We might have disagreements in private. We may not like how something's gone. We may disagree with decisions made. But when you're public, you don't understand that when I divide from you, there's more than just you and me that see what's going on. There's a whole body seeing what's going on. And so that's why we try to keep that unity as strong as possible at all times. I've had men come to me and say, I need you to talk to this pastor. Pastors want me to talk to other pastors. So I did it.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to him. And there was, then I would go back to the other pastor, say, this is what this is taken care of, and unity. And they were ease in their spirit because of that. And it helped me.
Well, let's go here for a second. And I know you want to jump in with some thoughts here too. As ministers, let's talk about that. I love what you said there about having division privately, and let's not take it publicly. That's why it's so important to me that as ministers, we can't just say everything we think and feel publicly on social media, from the pulpit. Listen, I may think that I may feel a certain way, and here's why I say that. For 20 years, I filled in on local talk radio for a friend of mine. There were lots of things I would have loved to have expressed an opinion on.
Mm-hmm.
There's even things today I would love to express an opinion on. But because of what I do, things I know, things like that, positions I hold, listen, at the end of the day, I don't want this man to have to answer for something that I ranted on social media just because I got a wild hair and just decided, well, it's my. You've got to show wisdom. You've got to show restraint. And so, Pastor, I'll tee you up on this one because, again, as a pastor, as a presbyter, as men in leadership, how do you guys coach people privately to say, hey, it's okay to have an opinion, but you have to know how to harness that in a positive direction? Because I think you're right. I think when we talk about the men in those conclaves, there could be men that said, I didn't vote for this guy. I hope he falls flat on his face. Because, right, we're men. We know the psyche of men. But you have to publicly go, well, we got a pope. You know, we're good to go. So I'm going to throw the question to both of you. How do you counsel men privately to harness those things that they think and feel in a positive direction, not sacrificing who they are, but harnessing it differently? Am I asking that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a unique insight on this because there was a time where I was very critical of church leadership. Ironically, that coincided with criticism for national leadership, political. And I had some sort of a metamorphosis in my thinking, some sort of a change. And what it was is sometimes things aren't as ugly on yourself as they are on other people. And one day I realized, why are we tearing ourselves up in front of the whole world to see? These should be matters that should be left for behind closed doors, because we take enough criticism from the world. We don't need criticism from some rogue brother out here that, by the way, has never been in leadership. 90% of the time, they've never been in leadership, but they've got so much criticism for leadership. Before I was a pastor, it was easy to criticize that. Now that I'm a pastor, I can look at that and I can say, oh, they have no idea what they're talking about. They have no idea the tightrope that a pastor walks to try to keep unity, to try to keep people together. It's so easy to criticize. With the Catholic Church, there's a podcast I occasionally listen to. It's I think it's called Pints with Aquinas. Okay, it's a Catholic podcast. It's not something that I listen to often, but they have certain subjects that I have went and listened to them talk about when I was doing a certain study on something, and from a Catholic perspective. And that's why it's pints. Catholics can drink. But anyways.
Well, listen, you just have to, you can put tea in a pint. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's what they're drinking, but I will say this.
Not likely. Yeah.
They will criticize decisions made by the Catholic Church. They just never criticize the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
They'll criticize a decision that the Pope made, and when I say criticize it, I don't even think they'll criticize it, but they'll question it. But they'll never question the Pope himself. There's a big difference. I can say, I don't know if that was a great decision. Time will tell. And that's a whole lot different than saying, I can't believe this leader made such a poor decision, because now you're assigning this somehow to him as a person, this like something's wrong with him. And that's the difference. Listen, we're allowed to have opinions. I'm never going to 100% agree with anyone. I've got some very opinionated saints, and I've told them, you're allowed to have your opinion, and it's allowed to be different than mine. We're not ever going to agree 100%, but there's some things that are non-negotiable, okay? Unity, non-negotiable. Tearing down the church, non-negotiable. You got to be careful about that. You'll be held guilty. The Lord's not going to just overlook the fact. What happened to you? Well, you had a couple sisters, and I don't know how close was you in age?
I've got a sister that's 2.5 years younger than I am.
Did you guys fight much?
17 years younger than I am. Oh my, yeah.
Did you fight much with your brother growing up?
Man.
What happened when you fought each other, when you said things, when you you'd get mad, you'd just be in a fight, and you would say something about your brother's character, your wife's or your sister's character, how she's such a. Immediately the parent comes in. Now you take that back. Why? Because we're allowed to disagree. We're allowed to say she done a bad thing, whatever. But when you start saying she's a bad person, Mom and Dad, same way with our Heavenly Father, He's not going to lightly look at it when we are talking about each other's character and who we are. However, we're allowed to disagree on a decision.
Man, forgive me. I've been wanting to jump in there because you're, and I'm going to throw it to you for this one. I love what you said there, because in our society today, especially in church leadership, we have people that will question church leadership. There's two reasons people question. They question for understanding, and they question for dissension. Well, I'm questioning his decision-making, or I wouldn't do it that way. Just to your point of, man, I'd do it that way. Boy, if they'd let me have a shot at it, I'd do it this way, and I'd show them that my way was the right way. And that's why people question. I don't mind questioning for understanding. What I do mind is questioning for dissension, because we have gotten in the Apostolic Church, this is a spirit that I see that's creeping up. Why is Pastor doing it that way? I can't believe the pastor's doing it that way.
Social media has made us have an inflated importance of our opinion. We think our opinion is important. One of the biggest reasons that you won't see me hardly ever, I rarely ever get on Facebook to post. I rarely get on there to look at what other people's posted, because I had the epiphany. Who cares? My opinion is not going to hardly change any. Now, I can get on there and with some Bible or something and make a difference, but my opinion is meaningless to them. Hardly anybody cares about my opinion. That's just the truth.
So as a pastor, Brother Kuntzman, and as a leader, how do you take curiosity and keep it from becoming dissension? Because I don't want to try to lead the witness here. I want to try to pull a little conversation out of this, okay? Because again, in your role, you've got to kind of filter, is this happening for agenda, dissension? Is it something that I've got to pull the Barney Fife card and nip it in the bud, or do you filter out understanding? I hope I'm asking the question correctly.
I think that, first of all, I think it was Soren Kierkegaard who said that people cry out for freedom of speech for the freedom of thought that they lack. And many people yell out because if you throw a rock, you're going to hit something. And usually the biggest toad in the pond is one's going to jump, right? So they try out, usually out of guilt. We're talking about dissension, which destroys unity. As a pastor and as a leader, I have personal convictions that I live by. They're mine. But I'm not going to force them on other people. And the same thing when you're as a presbyter. The presbyter position is a little different. You're not really, you don't do a whole lot until you have to do a whole lot, until you're called upon, and then you have to jump right in there and do what you can. The best way to lead people is not let them know they're being led. Just love them, be gentle, be kind. I want to please the Lord Jesus Christ as I serve these men, and that's what I'm doing. In my service to those men, I'm there for them if they need me. Now, some of them probably will never call me, and that's fine. But I'm always going to be there if they do call, and I'm going to contact them. I do contact every pastor in my section when there's something going on. I want communication to be a part of everything we do. And that's the key. Let them talk to you. Now, my wife, who I love, and she's a very beautiful, smart woman, she says discretion is your friend. That means you don't have to say everything that's in your mind.
Yeah.
It's hard not to. Sometimes you want to pop off, but you don't know that one word that you say can destroy somebody. And you didn't mean it. I've had people that come to me offended because I didn't talk to them, because I looked right at them. I didn't see them. My mind was somewhere else. And so you can cause offense and don't even have to open your mouth and not realize it. Because people are so easily offended in our culture today.
They're looking
for it. And there's a great book by John Bevere called The Bait of Satan. And I encourage everybody I ever talk to when it comes to offense to go to that book and read it, because he's dealing with offense and how to overcome it. In this world, you shall have tribulation. He just talked about how there's going to be offense. Offenses will come. How do you deal with that? I've had people say some of the hardest, cruelest things to me, and I've had to walk away and say, Jesus, help me to forget that conversation. Help me to forget it and forgive. And then, and you know what? In time, I forgot the conversation. I forgot the specifics of it. The sting of it was gone, because I like to give people the benefit of the faith. There's a difference between the benefit of the doubt and the benefit of the faith. When I would give them the benefit of the doubt, yeah, they could have said that, but I'm going to let it go. No, the benefit of the faith says they would never say that. I'm not going to believe that is even possible. So I have faith in people. Now, sometimes, and I know my friend, Brother Fairburn here, he has had this problem before. He loves people. He gives the benefit every time. Some have taken that benefit and they've excelled and they've been a blessing. Sometimes they have proven that they're not unworthy of that at that moment in their life. But does that mean they're always unworthy of it? No. That's why he is such a great pastor, because he continually gives people the opportunity. And everybody else is shaking their head saying, what is he doing? Meanwhile, that person is receiving grace. What is grace? It's unmerited favor. It's something I don't deserve. What is mercy? It's the same type of thing. I don't deserve the mercy of God. But if I got a pastor or a leader or an elder in my life that says, you know what? I don't care what you did yesterday. You're coming to me now, and I'm gonna help you move forward. That's what we do when we lead men. We work with them. They work with us. We respect them. They respect us. We speak highly of them, even though in private we might disagree. Brother Fairburn and I, we don't always agree on everything we talk about, but we have never been unpleasant to one another. We've never been unkind to one another, and we've always walked away friends. And that's how it should always be.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing I'll say too, is that I love the way you framed around that, because it's something that I tell my 24-year-old son all the time. This is the most important real estate you'll ever own, between your ears. You have the choice of either giving that to people or reclaiming ownership of it. And there are times that I've had things just angst in my spirit, and I have to go, you know what, stop. I have to talk to myself and go, stop it. You're letting something bother you that you should not let bother you. And of course, the enemy's not, I'm not trying to give the enemy credit, but the enemy is not a fool. He knows what our buttons are. And again, in leadership, I think to what you said very well is, I may disagree in private, right? It's like our parents said, and I wasn't guilty of that. My wife and I fought in front of the kids. They say we don't fight in front of the kids. We disagree in private. We don't fight in front of the kids. Sometimes it comes out because you're human. You make mistakes. But I love what you said about showing grace and showing mercy, because you're right. It's a very scriptural thing. To whom you give mercy in those situations, you give grace, you're going to receive grace. Because here's the thing, in private, the Lord will never deal with you publicly in a lot of situations.
Oh, and in a lot he will.
In some he will. In some he will. For my own perspective, it's those times the Lord chastens me privately and deals with me harshly. It
seems that there's a principle. If it's done publicly, a lot of times it's corrected publicly, and that's
a reaping and sowing process.
That's why we've often heard it, and it kind of means the same thing. But pride goes before a fall. It's actually a haughty look, right? But we get all haughty. God will humble us real fast. And but I want to ask Brother Kuntzman a specific question about what he does, because as presbyter in the UPC, you serve the role. If you was in the Catholic Church, you'd be called a bishop. However, in the UPC, each pastor is really autonomous, and so you actually don't have any authority with teeth over them, except for if they really get out of the way, they could be called before the board or something like that. But if they're teaching false doctrine or something big, but other than that, you really don't have. So you have to be such a diplomat and really do what I have said often. I've told people, being a pastor feels like being a grease gun and just constantly squirting grease between people that are hard to get along to help them not to rub each other wrong. And I'd like to hear you talk about that, because you're in I believe the first presbyter in the state of West Virginia that is not a pastor, which I think is a phenomenal thing. I think really, truthfully, I'm not trying to make any rule suggest anything, but I think it's a phenomenal thing. There's no hidden agenda. And as a matter of fact, I want to say this before we go back to the first thing I said. One of the great accomplishments of T.F. Tenney that never gets talked about was the fact that T.F. Tenney was a long-term superintendent of the state of Louisiana. And Louisiana has varying degrees of holiness standards, holiness ideas. And he was able to bring these brothers together where there was just harmony and fellowship, even though the churches were so diverse. And I think that was a mark of that. So you could see that that's what he done. He learned to be a grease gun between ideas that don't. A lot of times, if we notice this, if you have a really strict holiness standard and this other church over here doesn't quite, and listen, as UPC folks, we know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe other folks won't understand this as much, but it can vary pretty greatly. Listen, I'll just use our church. Growing up, we were taught against having Christmas trees, celebrating Christmas. I could go down a list that would be pretty for a lot of people.
TV,
be like
ball games.
TV. I mean, it was everything. Yeah. It was everything, and of course, we left those things up, most of those things, but still. You'll take one church that will not want to fellowship another church because they do these things. They don't want them. But a good leader is able to get these people to come together, work together, not fear one another, not fear that this guy is going to talk about that a little bit. How is it? I mean, that's a very It's a very tight rope to walk.
Well, first of all, I want to honor a man by the name of Roger Zimmerman Sr. He is the first presbyter in our district that I know of that did not pastor but was presbyter. And he's a great man.
Yeah.
Good man. He is also right now our global missions representative for the state of West Virginia, or the West Virginia, Western Maryland district. It's a mouthful. A great man of God. And so he served in that capacity for some time. So I'm the second man that's served as presbyter without being a senior pastor of the congregation. A good man of God. Not the Bible, but there's a principle that says that God can mightily use a man who's not willing to get the credit, or who doesn't care who gets the credit.
Yeah.
And that is the role of presbyter. If a man that wants to be a presbyter or serve in any other official capacity in an organization does so because they want to be seen, they're in it for the wrong reason. Jesus Christ was getting ready to go to Gethsemane. It is Passover time. It is a celebration, and he is beginning to feel the weight of what's around the corner. He walks into this upper room in Jerusalem that's been prepared. And when he walks in there, he instantly gauges the atmosphere. The Bible said that there was a controversy that rose up between the disciples, that who was going to be the greatest in the kingdom, who was going to lead. And Jesus saw that, and he took a towel and a basin, and he washed their feet, and he served them. According to the tradition of the day, the lowliest person in the room, in their social sense and in leadership, should have been the one to take the towel and the basin. But Jesus did, and he taught them a valuable lesson. As leaders, we need to understand we are not lords over God's heritage. We are not kings. I heard a man one time say, and he was very upset at that time, and the Lord helped him, and he passed away a very righteous, clean, pure man. But at the time, because of hurts, he told me one day, he said, well, I think that the closest thing to a king in today's world is a pastor, because his pastor had been abusive. And a pastor can be spiritually abusive. We have to guard against that. But by and large, and by the majority of the time, pastors are good men and women, there are women pastors too, who love the people that they serve, and they serve them with a love that is Christ-like in nature. And that's what you have to do no matter what level of leadership, you love people. I always tell people in Purpose Institute, I'm the dean of the West Virginia Western Maryland District campus in Huntington, West Virginia, for Purpose Institute. It's an apostolic training organization through the United Pentecostal Church. And I tell them there's only two things the early church was concerned with. And if we get these two things right, we're always going to be right. But once we get them wrong, we're in trouble. The one thing they got right was Jesus Christ. The second thing was people. If our focus is upon Jesus and people at all times, we are going to be successful. If my heart was right with Jesus and I can work with people too, then I'm always going to be successful at what I do, no matter what it is.
Well, we've got to understand what connects with people as well too. I love what you said there, because here's the thing that I see. And again, all three of us have strong business acumen. So here's what I see. And I love what you said about that. We keeping the two simple things. It's like, I'll give you an example, and I'll pivot here. And I'm not trying to go into another diatribe. Forgive me, brothers. I'm not trying to do that. There's a restaurant chain up in Gallipolis called the Shake Shop. I used to call on them years ago. They don't change anything. They've been in business for, I think they were coming up on 75 years. I was talking to the guy that owns it.
You get the
now.
stuffed shirt.
Yeah, I've got a story about that. I got reprimanded by the longtime owner, Jeff Snedeker, because of the way I eat my stuffed shirt. Yes, I love that. It's a great burger. But what I learned from Jeff was, he's like, we don't change things. We're just going to do what we do. We're not McDonald's. We're not Taco Bell. We're not any of these big chains. We do what we do, and we do it right because that's what we do. Today, what I see in the Apostolic Church is, well, we're not doing it like this one does it, so we need to try to reinvent the wheel. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. Just do what you do it well. We're not trying to. Bible Apostolic Church should never be in competition with Apostolic Life Cathedral. We should never be in competition with New Beginnings Apostolic Church, New Covenant Pentecostal Church over in Chesapeake. Selfishly, that church that my dad founded. We should never be in competition with those facilities, because then we're taking our eye off Jesus Christ and we're taking our eye off people. But I hope that we understand and we come back, Brother Kuntzman, to what you just talked about, the simple things. And we don't try to overcomplicate the simple. We just go, okay, this is what Bible Apostolic Church does uniquely. This is what Apostolic Life Cathedral does uniquely. This is what New Beginnings Apostolic Church does uniquely. This is what Pentecostal Truth Ministries does uniquely. We should have our own unique bodies because we have unique people. But we should keep the main thing the main thing. Let me ask you this in the last few minutes that we've got together. How do you, as presbyter of the section, help pastors understand that simple focus? Because, again, you were talking earlier about you communicate with pastors in your section and things like that. And I'm sure you have pastors that go, hey, Brother Kuntzman, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? How do you keep those core principles simplistic?
When I receive a call from a pastor, and the best way to advise, if they're asking for advice, is from the Word of God. I don't have to give them my opinion. I'll give them what Jesus said, what Jesus taught, and what the Word has in it. Because that is where all your answers come from. Now, the problem is some people don't know what the Bible says, so they can't advise properly. And so leaders need to be people of the book. You know what the book says, what the Bible says. In the United Pentecostal Church, we have the Bible and we have the manual. Yeah. I'm going to go by the Bible. Almost everything I do. Now, I'm bound by that manual because that's the core. Those are the things I agreed to when I became a member of the organization. But at the same time, I'm going to advise regarding scriptural principles at all times. And if I can do that, if I can stay in a book, I'm free and clear. And I gotta love these men. You have to love people that you're. And I love these men before I was ever asked to be presbyter. And I will love them when they decide that someone else needs to do the job. Because I never expected to be a presbyter. And I'm thankful for it. I believe God put me in the position at the right time. I believe it's the will of God at this point in my life for this to happen. And while I'm doing it, I'm going to do the best job I can to love these men and to love these churches. And when the time changes, then I'll be just as loving as I was when I got in the position. Because I don't own the presbyter position, but I do own my own heart, and I love the men and the women that I'm serving.
Yeah, that's awesome. Listen, this is not the last time that we're going to have Brother Kuntzman on, and Brother Kuntzman and I share something in common. Besides the fact that we're both men, and that is that we have both had an interest in a lot of different biblical subjects. So this was our first time having him on. I'm telling you, we're going to have him on a lot more. Brother Kuntzman and I can get going on particular subjects, and even from different standpoints, we've always had an ability to. Even when we have differences of opinion, it's always so pleasant. And I think if I know I do, whenever we have these conversations, I learn a lot because either I'm like, okay, somebody else that has studied it agrees with me, or if there's disagreement, I can go back and say, maybe I need to go and check this out a little bit more. Maybe I was wrong about that. Maybe I got wrong information. And with the internet, you think it's so the information is available, but sometimes it's not right information. Yeah. And but I'm excited to go into some different subjects with. He recently come back from Israel. Yeah. And, before we go off, I would like to ask you that. How was your trip to Israel? And I know you guys went to Poland and then you went to Israel. And what was the most impactful thing that you've seen in Poland? And then what was the thing in Israel that you said, man, this was the most valuable experience, or this one thing I learned, or one thing I've experienced, this made a big change in my thought.
So we could talk for an hour about this, but I will say, in Poland, I visited with this Christians United for Israel, and we went to, we started off in Warsaw. We went to Majdanek, which was a concentration camp. Then we went to, and we visited synagogues that were in operation during World War II and now not. And then we went to Auschwitz and Krakow, Birkenau. And we went into this one beautiful temple synagogue in Krakow, in Jewish Quarter. Beautiful, gold leaf everywhere, just gorgeous. And our guide, his name was Eli Turpaz. He's from Israel. He told us, he said a phrase. He said, there are no prayers prayed here anymore. Not because it wasn't a house of worship, but because for you understand, to have a meeting in a synagogue, you have to have so many men to do that. I think it's 10.
10, yeah, quorum.
And because there's so many Jews that are dead now, remember that when World War II started, 16 million Jews were alive. Now we only at 15 point something. Now, if they hadn't been killed, we'd be up to 40 million here. So what struck me was the complete devastation of an entire people, and how these worshipers of the same God we worship the same God, Jehovah. We just believe that Jehovah, God of the Old Testament, is Jesus Christ of the New. They don't even worship in their synagogue, beautiful places. God, let that never happen to us. So you're devastated mentally and emotionally when you leave Poland. But when you go to Jerusalem, we got there on the Shabbat, and we walked onto the Temple Mount. Not on the Temple Mount. We walked by the Western Wall. We're not out in the Temple Mount, because we're not. But we went to that Western Wall, and all those Jewish men from every type of Judaism, whether they're conservative or reformed or secular Jews, were up there. You had guys that were, different brands, and then you also had all kinds of Christians up there worshiping God, dancing, and it was a beautiful thing. So you're inspired in Israel, but in Poland you were just devastated. And the one thing I realized the most was even the birds worship on the temple, near the temple. These little swifts were flying around, hundreds of them. While we're praying at the Western Wall, they're flying around singing their song, flying around circles above us. It was just beautiful. Everything at that Western Wall is worshiping the great Creator. I love it.
That's awesome.
Well, and it struck me that you were saying that because, the Lord, his people, the Jewish people, had such horrible, near extermination, if you will. But one day God's going to give them incredible redemption. Incredible redemption. He will not forsake his own. He will not forsake his own. That's what ran through my mind when you were saying that. One day the Lord's going to redeem them. He's going to step his foot. Brother Finney preached on that to us a couple weeks ago. He's going to step his foot on the mountain and say, enough's enough. I'm redeeming. I am redeeming back to myself what the world is trying to exterminate. And so that is so awesome.
He's already done it. Yeah. He's already redeemed. That's the thing. Blindness in part has come upon them. Paul said, did Israel stumble to fall? And if they're falling, allowed us as Gentiles to come into this great thing we call the church. how much more will their being able to stand up benefit us as well? And I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a great day when that. We may not be here. It depends on what your position is on eschatology. But wherever it's at, Jesus is coming. He's coming for a church, and he is turning his attention to those people that he first turned to. And what a beautiful thing that's going to be.
They shall look upon him whom they have pierced and mourn for him. That they're going to see. And I'm looking forward to that too. I can't wait to go to Israel. One of these days I'm going to get there. And I've always reminded of a story. I'm just waiting. I know this ain't probably going to happen to me. I need to have some faith in it. But I remember reading a story by about T.W. Barnes going to Israel, meeting the Archangel Michael. I said, Lord, I'd like to meet the Archangel Michael. Hey, I'd like for my life to be so important in the kingdom of God that angels would come to greet me. So,
Well, Pastor, I got good news for you. One day we're going to the Holy Land.
that sounds good.
The Lord gave me a song about that years ago. I've never been to Israel, but it don't matter. One day I'm going to the Holy Land.
Yeah.
I'm going to New Jerusalem, that city not built by hand. See what happens when you get three preachers together? We all got a thought. We all getting a word here. Brother Kuntzman, we cannot thank you enough for your time today. You have blessed us, and Pastor's right. I was trying to figure out how to spell eschatology. We were talking about that. But we are so glad you came to join us. Thank you, Brother Kuntzman, for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate you, Brother Sexton. We love you both. And Brother Fairburn and I have been friends now for over 10 years, I think.
Yep.
And we've developed a great friendship. And I'll be glad to come back and tackle any other topics we want to do.
Well, that sounds good. For Pastor Aaron Fairburn, Brian Sexton, be blessed in Jesus' name, and thank you for joining us today on the BAC podcast.